Europe on the brink of apocalypse. Putin is preparing to send his army onto the continent, and Europeans themselves are now convinced that a Russian invasion could begin at any moment. NATO is urgently moving weapons and troops to the borders with Russia and Belarus, and European defense industries are rapidly restructuring. The countdown is now in days. Watch for all the details.
The danger from the Kremlin is getting closer. The European Union is preparing to confront Putin. At the borders of Russia and Belarus, NATO countries are concentrating weapons and manpower. At the same time, members of the European Parliament are seriously working on a military Schengen.
We must show Putin that Europe is no longer associated with impotence and democracy with weakness.
The Schengen is being prepared in close cooperation with the North Atlantic Alliance. Brussels is taking decisive steps, including a plan to modernize the defense industrial complex. The European Commission has announced the timeline and presented a new package of measures. For military mobility, this will enable the European army to move quickly across EU territory without facing excessive bureaucracy, especially in the event of a potential threat from Russia.
In the defense industry, we will be strong if we are industrially independent, autonomous, and much less fragmented.
Ukraine is acting as an ally. The country will gain access to defense logistics.
We want to expand military mobility corridors in Ukraine. This would serve as a security guarantee, meaning we could provide faster support if needed.
First of all, it is necessary to modernize the infrastructure, digitize procedures, and increase funding. One of the key challenges for EU countries remains ensuring the rapid transportation of troops to potential combat zones.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
At the moment, the threat to the Baltics remains. And in the event of a sudden escalation, for example, the French army would need to cover about 1,500 kilometers to come to the aid of its allies. Although light units are able to move relatively quickly, heavy equipment requires significantly more time and preparation.
Currently, European bridges and railways are not suited for the rapid movement of tanks, soldiers, and military cargo. If transported from the west to the eastern flank, tanks could get stuck in tunnels, tangled in complex bureaucracy, and bridges might not withstand the passage of these vehicles.
Drawing on the experience of the Russian Federation's war with Ukraine, the European Union has devoted significant attention to modernizing critical infrastructure. Transport routes will be upgraded to dual-use standards so that they can serve both civilian and military needs simultaneously. The military Schengen plays a particularly important role in strengthening the defense of the Eastern Alliance, above all for the Baltic states and Poland.
Everything depends on our position, whether we can deter the enemy or encourage them to aggression.
But not everyone sees the danger from Russia, or they simply try to turn a blind eye to reality by maintaining close ties with the Kremlin dictator Putin.
We're talking about an armament program that will require us to spend every last penny. And this concerns all of Europe. From the statements of several influential leaders, it is quite clear that they want to enter the war.
Germany is doing everything it can to help Ukraine, making every effort to equip the Ukrainian armed forces with long-range missile systems, as well as organizing joint production on our territory.
For several months now, we have been working intensively with the Ukrainian government on implementing long-range weapons projects. The Ukrainian army is being equipped with such systems. We have agreed not to discuss the details publicly. Since we believe that the Russian side should not be informed about the extent of our military support, I can only say that we are doing everything possible to equip the Ukrainian army with weapon systems of the necessary range. And the number of such systems will increase in the coming weeks and months, if necessary, up to and including the production of such weapons in Ukraine itself.
The European Union's military budget is planned to be increased to more than 17 billion euros. In total, at least 100 billion euros are needed to modernize bridges and tunnels and to fully launch 4 corridors for military needs in the European Union. Putin's words cannot be trusted, based on Ukraine's experience.
There's no need to make things up and then form opinions about Russia based on those inventions. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. For example, people made up that Russia wants to attack NATO. Are you completely out of your mind or what? You're as dumb as this table, honestly. Who came up with this? It's nonsense, you understand? It's utter nonsense.
While the dictator is feeding journalists lies, members of the European Parliament are calling for regular joint exercises and loading tests. They want the European Union to follow NATO's example so that rapid reaction forces can respond swiftly to Kremlin aggression.
Russians are alarmed. A Ukrainian killer drone is carrying a 100-kilogram aerial bomb. And this is pure hell for the Russians. A strike right at the heart of the occupiers. Just one of these packages and an entire enemy group is sent flying into space. All the details coming up.
The Russian Federation's worst nightmare, or rather, the reason it can't sleep, is the new Ukrainian strike drone, the FP2. The FP2 is used for strikes on Russian rear positions. It can also carry an adapted aerial bomb as its warhead.
The FP2 drone is specifically designed for strikes, especially with a penetrating warhead. It's not soft like regular drones. Instead, it uses a 100-kilogram FAB-100 bomb with the tail section removed as its warhead. In other words, this drone can strike targets quite effectively. Because the FAB-100, for example, was the main bomb of World War II, the most widely used bomb. And at the same time, it can hit targets with high precision.
Information about the use of these drones is confirmed both by the occupiers and by Ukrainian soldiers themselves, who show them in action against the enemy across the Donbas. The OFAB marking indicates that this is a fragmentation high explosive munition, designed to strike unprotected and lightly protected targets.
The FP2 can hit both stationary targets and, in certain cases, moving targets as well. And this is a very important point because, for example, it allows you to strike the same Iskander launchers as they move into position.
The Ukrainian company Firepoint has introduced the FP2 strike drone in the middle strike class. It replicates the design of the long-range FP1 drone, which is used to strike targets in the rear of the Russian army.
This is, so to speak, a modernization of the long-range FP1 drone, which has a range of up to 1,400 kilometers. And the FP2 has retained the same design but is smaller in size. Apparently, it has a smaller wingspan, and its range is limited to 200 kilometers. This is where the bulk of the army and front-level depots and logistics centers are located. That's why this strike zone is so important.
The manufacturers offer the system both with a classic stationary launcher and a mobile version for rapid deployment disguised as a regular army truck.
You can drive up as close as possible, say within 10 kilometers of the front line, quickly launch, and then quickly leave the strike zone.
It is noted that the relative cheapness and availability of drones, combined with a heavy warhead, allows Ukraine to partially compensate for the shortage of high-precision missile weapons.
The FP2 can be considered a high-precision munition. Why? It is equipped with a camera. In the area, let's say, about 10 kilometers from the front line, a relay is suspended. And this drone flies like an FPV. That is, it has a camera on board. It strikes the target with precision. In other words, the operator sees the target before striking it.
Experts point out that due to their low flight altitude and sheer numbers, drones can bypass and overwhelm the Russian army's air defense systems, which in certain situations can be more effective than strikes from HIMARS missile systems.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Kupiansk, which Kremlin was quick to bury in his propaganda tales, is actually being held with an iron grip by Ukrainian soldiers. What is happening there right now and what kind of fighting is going on around the city? And why are Moscow's plans once again falling apart?
Another lie from Russian propaganda has trapped the Russians in their own statements.
I can't show certain signs or say specific words live on air. But I understand that today, once again, Putin needs to be sent in the direction of the Russian warship.
Apparently, the top leadership of the Russian Federation forgot to take their prescribed pills. They imagined that their troops had blocked 15 battalions of the armed forces of Ukraine and have full control over Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. This was reported by the so-called chief of the General Staff Gerasimov during Bunkanov's visit to one of the command posts of the West Group.
The units of the West Group have liberated the city of Kupiansk and continue to destroy the formations of the armed forces of Ukraine, surrounded on the left bank of the Oskil River.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine refuted the Kremlin's statement, explaining that counter-sabotage operations and special actions to search for and eliminate enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups are still ongoing in the city and its surroundings.
As of today, Russian occupiers are only present on the outskirts. Things are going very badly for them there. I wouldn't say the situation there is easy, and accordingly, today it's not exactly rosy. No, today the defense forces there are making considerable efforts to carry out the necessary actions, block the enemy, prevent them from further infiltration, and in fact push them back from the tactical positions that the Russians managed to seize earlier. And this is happening gradually. We are pushing the enemy back from Kupiansk.
The Russian leadership deliberately makes such statements. First of all, they are trying to show Russians that they supposedly have achievements in Ukraine in order to justify their losses. Their economy is going to hell, but they want to prove that everything is going according to plan. This is stated by Yuri Fedorenko, commander of the 429 Separate Achilles Unmanned Systems Regiment.
The Kremlin's second goal is to put pressure on Ukrainians. Similar statements make their way into Ukraine's information space, and it is Ukrainians who can be misled if they do not analyze the information. The third goal is to influence Donald Trump, who doesn't understand the details. Back in Alaska, Putin convinced Trump that he would capture all of Donbass and Kupiansk. That's why the Kremlin is now passing off wishful thinking as reality.
The Kupiansk direction remains a difficult spot on the map of Ukraine. In the city itself, the defense forces managed to tie up the enemy's offensive units, preventing them from imposing intense urban combat. The enemy is suffering huge losses and cannot advance beyond the outskirts. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces continue to gradually, step by step, block by block, push the occupiers back to their homeland.
At the moment, the Russian assault groups in Kupiansk are almost completely cut off from ground supply and logistics. Logistics are being carried out using heavy drones. It should be noted that Russia is not using the tactic of infiltration by small assault groups of up to 3 people. Accumulation and accordingly, further attempts to take control specifically of logistics and the location of Ukrainian defense forces. In addition, the occupiers are using the so-called pumpkin flag tactic. That is, when a group of 2 or 3 people runs into a certain area of Kupiansk, which is in the gray zone, that is territory not controlled by either side, they raise the Russian tricolor flag. They film all of this activity and then present it as so-called objective control data, supposedly showing that these micro-districts of Kupiansk are already, at this very moment, directly controlled by Russian occupation forces.
Right now, one of the main tasks for both sides is to cut off or at least significantly complicate logistics. And despite all the difficulties of the situation, including weather conditions and a shortage of personnel, Ukrainian defenders are handling this masterfully.